Have we ever considered that one of the greatest football players in history was shaped by a body that from the very beginning was considered too small to compete? There is a belief that quietly lives in the minds of many people. The world always favors those who are stronger, those who are taller, bigger, faster, and braver, as if life were an arena that only makes room for those with the most striking advantages. That is why, when we see Lionel Messi standing on the pitch among players with much larger physiques, we feel that something does not make sense. How is it possible that someone who does not appear physically dominant becomes the center of gravity of the game? Why do defenders who are taller and stronger so often seem to lose their bearings when facing him? The answer lies not only in talent, but also in a philosophy that quietly changes the way we view weakness. As a child, Messi was diagnosed with growth hormone deficiency, a condition that hindered his physical growth. The cost of the hormone therapy his family had to undergo was not cheap, until Barcelona ultimately made the major decision to help fund his treatment while also bringing him to the La Masia Academy. Many people see this story as one of good fortune. But if we look more closely, there is something far more interesting. A body that did not grow like that of most children his age meant that Messi never had the luxury of relying on physical strength. He could not win simply by crashing into his opponents. He could not hope that his body would protect him in physical duels. Every time he stepped onto the pitch, he was forced to find another way. And often, when one door closes, people discover a way of thinking that would never have emerged if that door had been open from the beginning. Imagine water flowing between rocks. Water is never harder than stone. It never tries to prove that it is stronger. Yet over the years, it is the water that changes the shape of the stone. Not because of strength, but because of its ability to find openings. Messi plays by a similar principle. He does not confront his opponent's bodies directly. He avoids them. He shifts direction a fraction of a second before contact occurs. He changes his rhythm when everyone expects him to keep running straight ahead. What appears simple to spectators is actually the result of thousands of tiny decisions made in an amount of time that is almost impossible to imagine. This is where we begin to realize that intelligence is often not about knowing more, but about moving in ways that others do not expect. Perhaps that is why we so often misunderstand the meaning of strength. We assume that strength always means being able to push harder, speak louder, or display obvious dominance. Yet, in many situations, strength actually comes from the ability to eliminate unnecessary movement. Observe the way Messi dribbles the ball. He rarely makes excessive movements. His touches on the ball are short, efficient, and almost always purposeful. Even when running past several players, he does not seem to be forcing himself. As though his body were not fighting, but conversing with the space around it. There is a calmness that is difficult to explain. And perhaps that is what makes his game so beautiful. Not because it is full of explosive moments, but because it is full of precision. Psychologist K. Anders Ericsson once introduced the concept of deliberate practice, which is training that does not merely repeat habits, but is intentionally designed to improve specific weaknesses. This idea helps explain why greatness is rarely born from talent alone. Extraordinary people usually spend far more time refining the most fragile parts of themselves. If that is true, then Messi's physical limitations were not merely obstacles to overcome. They were a compass that constantly pointed to the areas he needed to develop. Because he could not rely on his body, he developed his ball control. Because he did not excel in aerial duels, he refined his ability to read the game. Because space was always limited, he trained himself to make decisions in fractions of a second. The very same weaknesses, when viewed from another perspective, turned out to become teachers that never stopped teaching. But there is a question that may be more important than all the technical explanations above. Why are some people able to turn limitations into advantages, while others stop because of those very same limitations? Perhaps the answer lies not in how great the problems they face are, but in the meaning they assign to those problems. Two people may experience similar shortcomings, yet end up living very different lives. One sees the shortcomings as a verdict. The other sees them as a direction. This is where psychology meets philosophy. It is not the world that first determines who we are, but the way we interpret the world. The ancient Greek philosopher Epictetus once said that people are disturbed not by events, but by their judgments about those events. That sentence sounds simple, yet its impact is extraordinary. If we believe that weakness is the end of possibility, then every challenge will feel like a punishment. But if we see weakness as the starting point of adaptation, then every limitation becomes a question. What ability must emerge because I do not have the easy path? Perhaps this is why history is so often filled with people who were shaped precisely by their own shortcomings. Look at everyday life. Some people were not born into wealthy families, so they learned to manage money more wisely than those who grew up with financial comfort. Some grew up as quiet children, so they developed the ability to listen, making them more empathetic leaders. Others failed repeatedly until they eventually developed mental resilience that could never be bought with comfort. Shortcomings are indeed painful, but they often force us to build something that would never have emerged if everything had gone smoothly. Perhaps we are too busy counting what we do not have, that we forget to notice the new abilities quietly growing behind those shortcomings. At this point, Messi is no longer interesting merely as an athlete. He becomes a symbol of how people negotiate with their fate. He could not choose what kind of body he would have when he was born. No one can, but he could choose how that body would be used. There is a great difference between accepting limitations and surrendering to them. Accepting means understanding reality without allowing reality to determine one's entire future. Surrendering means allowing reality to take over every possibility. Messi seems to have chosen the former path. He accepted that he would never be the biggest player. Then he decided to become the most unpredictable player. Behind all the trophies, records, and stadium cheers, perhaps Messi's greatest lesson has nothing to do with football. We live in an era that constantly encourages people to compare themselves with others. We see other people's strengths every day, then quietly assume that we are falling behind because we do not possess the same things. Yet if everyone were given identical strengths, perhaps no one would have a reason to find their own path. It is precisely because everyone has different limitations that everyone has the opportunity to create different ways as well. Like water, which is never jealous of stone, because it knows that its strength is not meant for striking, but for flowing. Perhaps that is the quietest philosophy behind Lionel Messi's physique. The world teaches us to seek strength before we move, while life often shows that it is the courage to move that gradually gives birth to strength. And perhaps the shortcoming that most often makes you ask today, "Why me?" will one day become the reason the world asks, "How did he do it?"